Welcome back to the Real Life Runners Podcast, episode number 436. So most runners probably think of running as a two-legged sport, but the truth is running is actually a one-legged sport repeated thousands of times. And that's why hip strength and single leg strength and control are so critical. Almost every gait issue and overuse injury that I've seen in my 18 plus years of being a physical therapist traces back to some sort of hip weakness and poor single leg control. So today we're talking about both of those things and taking you back in a little storytelling of how all of this got started with Kevin and I. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the show, runners. Today we're talking about the hips.
The hips and the hips don't lie.
I was going to say that.
I was waiting for it. I can't believe you dropped that
Come
one.
on, Shakira.
Because your hips clearly do not lie.
Shakira. Oh, we're starting to singing already in the episode.
We're a minute in and we're into song. Excellent.
I mean, this is always going to be a sign of a good episode, if you ask me. I am a physical therapist. I have a doctorate in physical therapy. I've been practicing for over 18 years now, which is insanity. And considering we just celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary yesterday, that's an easy thing to keep track of.
Yeah. Apparently those guys match up nicely.
Yeah, because we got married right after I graduated from PT school.
Yes, because
year.
Yes, I waited until you were a doctor until I married you. It sounds weird that way. Fantastic. But that is timing what actually happened.
That is actually what happened. So let's take it back to PT school because that's where this whole journey started. And this is the thing that I don't know if a lot of runners really understand this, especially if you've gotten into this sport for recreation or to get in better shape. But a lot of runners that I've worked with in the past and even clients on our team, when they first come in, before they start to go through some of the lessons in our program and really understand what's going on in their body, don't realize how important the hips are. I think a lot of people think about running and they think about the feet. They think about what shoes they're wearing and they've heard of the terms of pronation and supination and they think about control and do I need to have an orthotic and a certain amount of support in my feet. But not as many people are familiar with the critical role of the hips in running.
Yeah, my background, I have a lot of background in running. You have the background in physical therapy before you really fully embraced the love of running. Those kind of came together. But my background in running and selling shoes, a lot of my thoughts on how to fix any sort of injury issue was to put the appropriate shoe on it. Yeah. And my strength training protocol came from what I was doing for strength when I was in high school. So we're looking at like mid-90s strength training. Yeah. That's very different than current strength training, and even in college that were like early 2000s. So that form of strength training coming from very good sources was still not what we should be doing based off of like current understanding.
And so one of the things that people don't really understand is how the hips are essentially the power center of running. That's really where all of your I shouldn't say all of your power, but the majority of your power comes from, because your glutes are your main hip muscles. And there's 3 different glutes that we're talking about. There's glute max, glute med, and glute min, all of which play a slightly different role in the running gait process. But your glutes as a whole, as a group, are responsible for propulsion, like moving you forward. They're responsible for stability, like making sure that you don't just topple over since you're balancing on one leg. For your alignment, your running alignment, making sure that the forces are going through your joints properly, and of course for force absorption, actually absorbing the forces that the ground is placing on your body. And a lot of runners think, oh, if I do strength training, I should probably strengthen my core or my quads or my calves, and all of those things are definitely important, but your hips are really both the steering wheel and the shock absorbers of your stride. Like, they do a lot of really important things. They provide the support and the propulsion to make sure that you're stable and not just wasting energy all over the place. And they also provide the main muscle. Your glute max is the main muscle to help propel you forward. It's the largest and strongest muscle in your body.
And I remember when I was working out in high school, like my two key exercises that I would do if I went to the gym, because I'd like to go to the gym with my dad and lift, the big things that I would do for my legs were machines in the first place. And it was leg extensions for my quads, and then you'd lay down and you do hamstring curls. Like those were the two big ones that I would do. And then they had a thing for calves, but that machine was annoying, so I didn't even like using that one. But that's what I was trying to hit, was like quads, hamstrings, and then maybe calves. And my sister had knee issues, and so she had this like band that she would put around our door and do different like swings to try and work her hips. My hips didn't bother me, and therefore I didn't do hip things.
Did your sister have knee issues or hip issues?
Hip issues.
Okay,
Sorry.
you said knee.
Yeah, no, she had hip issues, so she did hip exercises. My hips never bothered me, so I didn't do the hip exercises.
Right, but your knees sometimes acted up, so you did quads and hamstrings because those were the muscles that were controlling your knee.
Yeah, because those all touch the knee.
And that's what a lot of physical therapists, even back in those times, back in the day, really thought were the key to help treat knee pain. Like your VMO and your quads, like these were some of the exercises that I learned early on in PT school. And then really when I was in PT school, graduating PT school, and like early on in my practice, more and more started coming out about the importance of the hips.
Yeah, now that I think back on it, when I would work out over the summer, there was a very cool machine that you could, it looked like a clock, and you could move the pad to being in front of your knee or in front of your thigh or behind your thigh, and you could essentially do knee lifts or like kickback exercise. And I would do those over the summer because I saw other people doing it, and that machine looked cool. That was literally the main reason I did it, is that machine looked cool. And thinking back now, I was actually building hip strength when I did that.
Yeah, that was actually a hip strengthening machine, which is fantastic.
It just looked cool.
Oh, I'm so glad as a high school boy you were looking cool in the gym with your kickbacks. I'm so disappointed sometimes that I didn't know you earlier.
Yes. Yeah, everything about that was good. Like the bleach
so
blonde hair and the
cool.
frosted tips. Yes, that. Yeah, hold on, let me go to the gym with my dad. Everything about that just would
That's
have been
adorable.
Yes. And then I was trying to bench press more than the bar. That was always a good
Always adorable.
Always impressive.
Always adorable. So running, okay, so going back to Kevin's story, since we're there, this is really where my interest in the hips and running started to come together. Kevin, do you want to tell a little bit of your story, like in college, briefly, of what your running experience was like in college and then what happened from there?
Sure.
Briefly.
Short version. I was trying to hang on to a team that I wasn't really capable of hanging on to. I ended up overtraining almost entirely.
Meaning you felt like you couldn't keep up.
I could not physically keep up with the All-Americans on my team.
Because they were much faster.
I tried to. Go back to our recovery episode a few episodes ago. I was never recovering. Easy days were not recovery for me. Everything felt like it was hard. And that eventually led to my knees being in pain. And so then I'd go see the trainer, and they were doing various things for me, heat and stim, your favorites. And it didn't fix. And so then I would have to take time off, and I would come back, and it wasn't a problem until I started building up my mileage and running really fast, and then my knees hurt again. Heat and stem didn't do anything for me. Time off, that was my cycle. I did that until I stopped running, and then I got back on my own. I was in control of my own training, and when I tried to ramp it up post-college, I was living down in Miami with you, and as I started to ramp my mileage up and train harder and harder, that same exact ache and pain in my knee, stabby pain right in the middle of my knee, came back. And I was like, you have to fix this. You're becoming a doctor. Please make my knee stop hurting.
So that's what we did, actually. So basically, I was taking my newfound knowledge of the human body and body mechanics and kinesiology and running gait and all the things. And so I started putting Kevin through some tests, because one of the things that I realized in my education is that running is really a single leg sport, like we started talking about at the beginning of the episode. And when you break down the running, when you look at the running gait cycle, you are spending 100% of the time on one leg. That's what differentiates running from walking. In walking, when you go from one foot to the other, there is a brief phase in time where both feet are on the ground, right? Where you're pushing off of one leg and the other leg is already on the ground. Running, there's a float phase. So there's this phase in the middle of the gait cycle where both feet are off the ground. And that's what differentiates running from walking, especially race walking. If you've ever watched Olympic race walking and the awkwardness of Olympic race walking, you can see the importance of the hips, because those race walkers, they sure as heck have a lot of hip movement.
There's an incredible amount of hip movement. Also, if you're going to watch Olympic race walking, don't do it in slow motion and just see how almost every step they have a float phase and both feet are off the ground, and every runner in the race is cheating.
But we're going to just ignore that for this podcast episode and just talk about
personal pet peeve.
That's what's different between running and walking. So as a runner, you are spending 100% of the time on one leg, because when you are on one leg, the other leg is either kicking behind you or swinging forward in front of you. So all of your weight, all of your balance, all of your muscle on that side have to stabilize you and propel you forward. When you understand that, and you understand how you're taking somewhere likely between 150 on the lower end up to 200 steps per minute total, so that if you divide by 2, that's about 90, we'll just say 90 on average. If we take 180 as the average steps per minute, that's 90 steps per leg per minute. So depending on how long you're out there, that's a lot of steps. And so basically your body has to stabilize itself. All of the muscles have to turn on, all of the muscles have to activate, all of the muscles have to push you forward in a split second, like literally a split second.
Yeah, if you say that your foot's landing, we'll do the numbers easy, because it's 180 is not the magic number, but the math works out really nice on it. So if it's 180, that means your foot's hitting the ground 3 times every second. That's a really rapid time. If you try and just stand on one leg and wave your arms around like you're running, if you have strong arm movement for a run, just standing still on one leg, you start feeling like you're falling down.
That is actually a great exercise.
I know, it is a wonderful exercise. But if you just do that and you feel like you're unstable, now imagine doing that, but your foot has to not only be on the ground, it has to transition from like the rear foot to the forefoot so it can push off, and it has to do that 3 times every single second.
Right. Exactly.
Like, there's so much stability needed.
And so the other thing too is that with every step, because you're essentially jumping from one leg to another over and over again, it's not just your body weight that's going through that leg. It's 2 to 3 times your body weight is the amount of force that's actually going up through your body, through that leg, all the way up your body. So your body has to be very strong and be able to stabilize 2 to 3 times your body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that is 300 to 450 pounds of force that is going through your leg with every single step. And that requires a lot of dynamic pelvis control. It requires hip stability to help prevent knee collapse. So a lot of people think, they see, my knee's collapsing, I probably need more support in my shoe. That's what a lot of people think. That's what we were trained even as physical therapists. Oh, look, if there's too much pronation here, if there's too much knee collapse, we put an arch support in and everything is fixed. When in reality, the main problem is a lack of dynamic control in the hip. It's a lack of trunk control also. Like people always think about the core and they think, I've got to do sit-ups. But sit-ups are actually not a great exercise for runners. I actually hate sit-ups for runners because it's not a functional way. That's not how your abs actually work during running. Your abs are contracting isometrically to help stabilize you. Your obliques and everything, all of these muscles in your core and in your trunk are most of the time contracting isometrically, which means they're just bracing you. They're just stabilizing your body. They're not creating a lot of movement. You have some rotational movements from the shoulder and from the hips that need to balance each other out, but there's a lot going on. And so going back to the story with Kevin, I realized that a lot of his knee pain, I'm like, let me test his hips here, because Kevin had very strong quads and very strong hamstrings.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, kind of those muscles right around the knee on the front and the back that actually touch the knee, like he was talking about, those were strong. It's okay. That doesn't make sense because those muscles are strong. So where is this knee pain actually coming from?
That's because it looks cool when those muscles are strong. You get race photos, my favorite muscle. You get like strong quads, and your face is often going to look a little funky during race photos. If they catch you just right and your quads are popping, your legs look great.
Your legs look great.
Your hips, those aren't showing up in a video.
Those are covered by your shorty shorts.
They're mostly covered by my shorts.
Yeah, exactly. So I put Kevin, I remember this day. Do you remember this day? We were like,
yes, I do.
In my bedroom, and you were lying on my bed, and I was like, okay, now lift your leg. I had him like lying on his side, and I was testing out the strength in his hips. And he's, what? Was it the clamshell or was, okay. So I was asking Kevin to do a clamshell. So his knees were bent, and I was asking him to keep his feet together and just open his knees like a clamshell.
And I did. I totally did. It was perfect. But in order to do it, I rolled onto my back.
So that was not perfect, actually. So that was a complete compensatory pattern, because I like to use big words. So his body was compensating, right? Because the muscles that were supposed to do that motion, which are his hip external rotators, were so weak that they couldn't do it. So he was rotating his whole body to try to make his knee lift up.
In an act of amazing bedside manner, she said, "What are you doing?" I vividly remember this happening. I was trying to get my left knee to lift up off of my right knee. In order to do it, I tilted my left shoulder back so that I could tilt backwards and my knees separated. I could actually do the clamshell. And you literally looked at me and you said, "What are you doing? Don't move your shoulder and lift your knee up." And I'm like, it doesn't move. Like that was the issue. You're like, no, just lift your knee. I'm like, all right, I'm staring at my knee. I'm trying to make it move. I can't lift my knee. I couldn't do an unweighted clamshell. That was the problem without moving my shoulder. I thought I was doing them.
To be fair, it was against gravity. Gravity.
It was fine.
And the weight of your leg.
Yes, with my huge quad.
With those huge quads.
We've already covered the huge quads.
So your poor little hip rotators were not strong enough to overcome the massive volume of your quads.
All right, so my glutes were withered is what we're covering here.
Withered glutes. So I start poking Kevin, okay? Is actually what happened. I'm like, this muscle, contract this muscle right here. So I'm poking it, and granted, like he did at the time and still does have a nice and glute max, but like I was trying to get him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. He got a cute tush. But I was trying to get him to activate his gluteus medius, which is the main, like the hip external rotator. And there's obviously some deeper external rotators underneath all of that are not palpable. But I was trying to help him activate the muscle to actually rotate his hip. And so I was like putting my hand there and on the side of his hip, and I'm like pressing there. I'm like, you feel this? This is the muscle I need you to activate. And he's, I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, that is not exactly how that went. You tried to poke my glute med, and I started laughing hysterically.
Oh, that's true.
Because I am incredibly ticklish, and that spot is ridiculously. So I'm laughing hysterically.
So again, I say, what are you doing?
I'm like, stop poking me there. That's really ticklish. Which Andrew responded by poking me 5 more times, and she's like, "Hey, you have to stop laughing and breathe." And now I'm going to gently press the muscle that
I was trying to give you
activated.
I was trying to give you biofeedback.
You were trying to give me biofeedback. I was trying to not wet myself on your bed. It's really because I was laughing so hard. It was funny. And then you think it's funny to continue tickling when I'm laughing already, so you may have continued palpating.
No, but
see, we can both use big words.
But the funny thing about it was, like, after Kevin's tickle bug gets activated, I don't know why I just called it a tickle bug, but your tickle trigger. Yes. Like, once Kevin's tickle gets triggered, sounds very inappropriate for some reason.
I don't know why. That seems fine to me.
Then it's like anytime I touch him, no matter where it is on his body, he's so hypersensitive. So it's like where I was trying to get back to like my testing, me and my very serious PT student.
Yeah, she had a notebook and a clipboard.
So we were trying to get back to my testing and help him figure out how to activate this muscle. But I think we had to take a break because you just couldn't. You were laughing too hard.
We may have had to take a break, and then you may have called your roommate in to show her that I couldn't do a clamshell. Also very possible.
That was super manly, right? You felt just like a total manly man at that point.
It was a house full of ridiculously smart girls training to become doctors. Yeah. So I did not mind being a patient. I don't think any of the boyfriends of that house minded being practice patients.
Yeah, and you were great because you can see so many of your muscles. So Kevin was like our anatomy model in the process of it all too, because you could just take off your shirt and we could see lots of different muscles on you.
Yes.
Due to your lack of fat.
Thank you.
So, anywho, kind of the conclusion of that story is once we did finally get Kevin able to activate that muscle, then I gave him some exercises to help strengthen his glutes, especially his glute med, his hip external rotators, which then allowed him to have more dynamic control of his hips and his pelvis, which then made his knee pain go away. Because a lot of times what happens when runners have a lack of hip strength, when there's weakness in the hip stabilizers, we see a lot of these compensation patterns. So things like I mentioned already is the knee collapsing in.
I had that one.
Yes, you did. So the knee collapsing in is one of the most common things that we see. We also see rotation of the knee. So a lot of runners don't understand how to differentiate between the collapse and the rotation. Oftentimes they go together because it's the hip that's controlling both of those motions.
Yeah, the knee collapsing in is really easy to visually see. If someone's ever taken a picture of you from straight on and from the hip down to the knee is angled and from the knee to the ground is straight down, you are collapsing in. There's some high-level female marathoners especially that have absurd knee collapsing in, and they're setting world records. So there's ways to overcome, but it is such a clear sign.
Yeah, it's definitely a clear sign. And women are more prone to this versus men because we tend to have wider hips. And so we have what's called a wider Q angle, which is like the angle between the knee and the hip and the pelvis. And so we do have more incidents of this. And it can be a normal gait deviation for some people, like Kevin mentioned. Like it doesn't have to cause problems, but it can be a sign that there is weakness. And linked to that is also overpronation, because when that knee collapses in, oftentimes the foot collapses as well. And then there's also a pelvic drop that happens. So when all of your weight is on one side, and you can have a pelvic drop or overpronation without the knee collapse as well. Oftentimes, a lot of these things are seen together. But basically, when you're in single leg stance, when all of your weight is on one leg as your other leg is swinging through as you're running, when your hip muscles have to stabilize that pelvis. If they are too weak, the hip drops down. So which is whatever leg you're currently standing on, which is called stance phase of gait, the pelvis will drop to the opposite side because the muscles on, say all of your weight's on your left leg and your right leg is swinging through, your left hip muscles are weak. And so that pelvis, it just doesn't have control of it. So if you think about like a table with a glass of water on it, the goal is to keep that table level. And the muscle's job is to contract to keep the side of that table strong. And if they're weak, they just overstretch because they don't have the strength to hold on to it. And that table just tilts a little bit, which will allow that cup of water to slide down to the opposite side.
Okay, so I was trying to do this myself as you were going through that. So can you repeat one more time? If I'm landing on my right foot,
okay,
I'm still in stance phase. Mm-hmm. Is my right hip lower than my left hip?
If you're landing on...
My right foot is on the ground. Is my right hip low or my right hip is high?
High.
My right hip's high.
Yeah, so your left hip is dropping. If it's whatever leg is on the ground, those are the muscles that are active, because those are the muscles. Your other muscles are active also, trying to help the leg swing through. But in this specific gait deviation with the pelvic drop, we're seeing that the pelvis drops to the opposite side.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Along with that too can be what's called a lateral trunk lean, which means you're leaning towards one side or the other. Again, a lot of these things all go together, because when your pelvis drops or your knee collapses, your body just naturally compensates. Your body is amazing because its goal is to always keep you upright and moving forward. And so your body just naturally makes a lot of these compensations, and that's why a lot of these things are tied together. They can be separated, but oftentimes you see a lot of these things in combination. And then overstriding would be another compensation as well, because people are trying to run faster and they're not able to get their leg back underneath them quick enough. So there's a lack of strength in the hip that can lead to overstriding as well.
And overstriding is only going to make bigger issues, because if you overstride, you're going to actually increase the forces going through your body, because you then have more braking when the foot lands out in front of you, even it just going at faster paces, which was often why I didn't have the same injuries in college over the summer, because I wasn't running at the same speeds. Yeah. I could handle a lot of easy miles, which I can still handle a lot of easy miles, but I've also actually have some strength in inappropriate places now. But I could handle easy miles over the summer. I could even handle some speed over the summer. I just couldn't handle that much. It was when everything became so fast that I never had the time to recover, and then it snowballed.
Right, because the faster you run, the more force is generated, and the more force is going through your hips and your knees and your core and all of that, and the quicker you fatigue also. And so as your muscles fatigue, whether you're running faster or you're running longer, when those muscles get tired, they're not doing as good of a job stabilizing your body and also propelling you forward, which is why oftentimes your pace slows down. But since they're not doing a good job stabilizing you, they're also not doing a great job absorbing all of those forces that are going through your body. And so there's more wear and tear on the knee and the other joints, the hip, the lower back. That's another piece of that people don't always think about, because there's a lot of common injuries that are linked to weak hips. So things like IT band syndrome, glute medius or piriformis pain, trochanteric bursitis, like that hip bursitis, runner's knee, like what Kevin really had, issues with Achilles, shin splints, low back pain also is another very common injury due to weak hips, because your hips are not doing their job. So more force is going through your lower back, your spine. So then your back extensors and your lower back muscles kick on and are trying to do jobs that they're not supposed to be doing, because they're trying to essentially help the hips out, right? Because the hips aren't strong enough to do their job. So the lower back muscles and other muscles like the hip flexors and those kinds of things try to tighten up and stabilize the area and do the work that they're really not supposed to be doing.
All right, I got one question off the whole list, and I think I have the answer to it also, so I'm just going to ask and answer my question and see if I'm smart enough.
Let's do it.
Okay, Achilles issues. You're a whole joint removed from the hip. You're below the knee.
Two joints down, yeah.
Yeah, like you're all the way down at like the ankle when you get to the Achilles. Is the issue with Achilles injuries issues that your calves are doing too much work because they're trying to overcompensate from weakness up the chain?
Yes, that is one of the reasons. Like there's definitely multiple issues, but that is one of the big things, is that because your glute max isn't pushing you off, if you have a weaker glute max, and so you're not getting enough hip extension to power you, then your gastroc and your soleus, your calf muscles, then it's their job to push off even harder.
Oh, then so essentially, which is also going to cause the shin splints. It's just a matter of which side of your lower leg the pain shows up on, because you're trying to toe off entirely with your foot instead of your glute. That's not helping.
And so this is like one of the things that happens with the body, and this is again one of the reasons that so many runners get injured, because they don't have the proper strength in order to absorb the force, especially when they start to increase some aspect of their performance, whether that's distance, which is where a lot of it shows up when people start to train for longer races like half marathons. All of a sudden they don't understand, why am I getting injured? I was fine. I've run for years and I've been fine. And it's, your body was strong enough if you're doing 5Ks and 10Ks and doing lower distances, but as soon as you start ramping up the mileage and your muscles start fatiguing and you're not strength training, or you're not giving your body enough time and recovery to catch up to the new load that you're placing on it, then some of these things start to break down.
It's a very easy trap to fall into, because it feels like a 5K involves more power. I'm going faster. I need the power. So strength training logically makes more sense for something shorter and faster like a 5K. And why would I need to strength train as much? I don't need as much of power to do something longer and slower like a marathon. And so I think a lot of people go into a marathon thinking they need less strength training than something as fast as a 5K. And that doesn't make any sense. That was my assumption, is I did not need to strength train as much if I was going longer distances, but you arguably need to strength...
Because your pace is slower.
Because your pace is slower.
Okay.
Like, therefore, you don't need the same level of power. The problem is you're out there for so long that the muscles fatigue. So if you can increase your power, then when you're operating at sub-maximal efforts for a long period of time, you can keep operating for a long period of time before your body just breaks down and says, we can't do it anymore.
Because one of the benefits of power training and strength training is increased muscle activation and muscle recruitment, right? So you have more muscle fibers that are activated. So you have more muscle fibers trying to do the same job. And when you have, think about, I always like to use the analogy of lifting up a couch. You could probably lift up a couch by yourself or with 2 people, but if you've got 4 people on the job, it's going to be a lot easier. And you could probably lift it up a lot more repetitions, right? Like a lot more times when you have 4 or 5 people doing that job. And so it's the same thing with muscles. Is like when you strength train and when you power train, you're recruiting more muscles and more muscle fibers within those muscles. So you're just able to endure longer because you have more muscles doing the job. So the job gets shared across more, I don't want to say people, but fibers.
More fibers. Yeah. More fibers to share the load.
Exactly. And so if your hips are weak, like, yes, you could end up with an injury, or you could also start noticing things before the injury shows up. Things like feeling sloppy on your long runs, like just feeling like your body, you don't have as much control. Noticing that you're losing your running form, especially when you get tired. You might notice that your pace is slowing down, even though your breathing is fine. Like your heart rate's fine, your breathing's fine. Why is my pace slowing down? It could be because your muscles are fatiguing, right? Having difficulty with hills, especially because your body needs more strength on the hills, especially from the glutes. Your glutes are the main muscles that are going to help propel you up hills. And if your glutes aren't doing their job, then again, this is one of those instances where your calves are going to kick in more and you might end up with other issues like in the calf and the Achilles because you don't have as much power and push off from the glutes. And so other muscles have to jump in and take up the slack.
Yeah, that feeling sloppy on a long run is how I know that I'm slacking too much on strength training. If I finish a long run that I did all at a comfortable pace, not a long run that I put stuff into, but an all at comfortable pace, and I feel just spent, and I feel like I'm not getting my knees right, my foot's not moving smoothly behind me, I'm like dragging myself in, that's not usually a fitness issue, that's a strength issue. Almost every time for me, that is going to be I'm not spending enough time in the weight room.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you should probably be spending some more time in the weight room.
Yes, that's true.
Leading up to your 100-mile race in January.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, that's true. And I want to take a minute just to note why this is even more important if you are a runner over 40. And it's how, like, this is important for runners of all ages, right? No matter how old you are, we have our high school kids doing hip strengthening. I do single leg strengthening, especially with all of our high school kids. So this is important no matter your age. And if you're a runner over 40, it matters even a little bit more, especially if you're a woman, because when your estrogen levels decline in perimenopause and menopause, there is a reduction in tendon stiffness, there's a reduction in muscle mass, and there's also a reduction in neuromuscular efficiency. So your body is just not operating the same that it did. And so you have to be even more intentional to do these things to make sure that you're doing the proper exercises to help promote increased tendon stiffness, increased muscle mass, and increased neuromuscular efficiency so that you can make up for some of those natural losses due to the hormone changes that are going on.
Yeah, I'd argue that hips are naturally weak in a lot of distance runners. And so if you start with already in like the yellow danger-ish zone, and then you add a decline in estrogen and that just naturally reduces muscle mass, then you're going to start causing problems real quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the reasons why single leg control is one of the pillars of inside of our strength program. It's in all of our running plans, and it is extremely important. And there's really like 4 main aspects that we have to look at when it comes to single leg control. The first is your overall strength. So this is getting on a full body strength program, things like squats and lunges and split squats to really strengthen your glute max, doing exercises to help strengthen your glute med, your deep rotators, your lateral hip muscles. All of these things are very important just with overall strength. You also need to be doing stability, okay? Or your single leg control includes like helping your body stabilize itself, being able to maintain that level pelvis that we're talking about and helping to maintain knee alignment as your training load increases. As the load on your body, whether that's speed or distance or time, like whatever it is you're increasing, the load that you're increasing on your body has to be strong enough in order to stabilize itself to help absorb those forces and minimize the wear and tear on the joints.
So one of my favorite exercises on this, and you can correct me if I'm putting the exercise in the wrong spot, but one of my favorite exercises for stability is a single leg deadlift. And it also highlights a lack of stability on a lot of kids on our cross country team because they have the hamstring strength to do a deadlift. But as soon as they go onto a single leg, their hip of the foot that's not planted on the ground just flares up. They essentially look like me trying to do the clamshells back in the day. They open up so much because they can't maintain their pelvis at an even level. As soon as they put weight onto one foot, they're completely wobbling all over the place. And they're like, I have to hold the heavier weights. And it's no, you can't hold the heavy weights. Your body's not able to actually stabilize that. And you're always talking about make sure that you have a heavy enough weight that the exercise is challenging for you. And they don't feel like it's challenging to pick it up, but it's so challenging for them to pick it up and not wobble all over the place, which is why it looks like they're wobbling all over the place when they head out and run.
And I think that the other part about it is when they're doing the exercise wrong, maybe it doesn't feel as challenging because they're using a lot of other muscles to compensate for the weakness. It's compensatory. The compensatory patterns, if you want to use the full fun term. The other thing that we're looking at too with single leg control is coordination, which involves your nervous system. It's the message from your brain to your body and then obviously from your body back to your brain. So your nervous system is important to help control like the timing of your movement, your balance, your motor patterns. So like Kevin was mentioning with the single leg deadlift, that's just a fantastic exercise. That is one of my favorite exercises for runners. And yes, it does highlight stability, but it really highlights all of these things. It highlights stability, strength, and coordination because you need to have the proper motor pattern. Otherwise, your body is going to compensate. If you don't understand what a hinge movement is, which is what we're shooting for when it comes to a deadlift or a single leg deadlift, we want a hinge pattern happening. We want that motion and that control really coming from the glutes and the hips. A lot of people will overuse their back muscles and you'll see them round their backs or open up their hips because they're not strong enough to maintain the proper motor pattern. So good single leg control is the ability to maintain alignment in the body, proper alignment, and generate force without those compensations. And this is where it gets really important to understand where you are with your hip strength and your single leg stability. Because if you're compensating, then there's a weakness there, right? So the key then is to find that weakness and then you do targeted exercises to help address that weakness so that your body can operate the way that it's meant to. And that can also help to decrease pain in a lot of areas. A lot of people have a lot of tightness or a lot of pain, and it's because, again, those muscles are trying to kick in and do jobs that they're not supposed to be doing.
So this is where people can fall into the issue of they're doing strength training, but no one's checking to make sure their form is actually working correct, or they're not even sure what the correct form is. So they're doing it, they're upping weight from every couple of weeks. The weight goes up, they're increasing what appears to be strength, but they're doing it with so many compensations that they're not actually working the muscles that need to be worked. It seems like they're doing exercises that should be targeting hips, but they're doing it with poor form, and so they're strengthening their back, which is not really helping them in this case.
Or they're not strengthening their back, and they're actually just putting more strain on their back.
Yeah, strengthening / hurting their back is really what's happening.
Exactly. The place that you're going to want to start out is by testing your hip and single leg stability. So I'm going to give you guys a couple suggestions for some tests. And these are tests that we give our clients as soon as they join our program, because it's really important for us to figure out where people are. Where I give single leg exercises to every single client, no matter where, no matter if they have weakness or if they're doing pretty well. Even if people come in, which I will tell you, the number of people that have come into the program without some sort of single leg weakness, I'm pretty sure is zero. I like to avoid generalizations, but I'm pretty sure that there's not one person in the program, like including myself, right? I'm including myself in this. I'm not saying, oh yeah, my hips are amazing. My hips don't lie either, but
your hips are amazing.
But we all have some sort of hip weakness. And I think it's important for us to understand, like, that's this is part of it, right? This is just something that we're going to be continuously working on. So here are a couple of my favorite tests. So the first test, and this one's one of my faves, is the single leg sit to stand. So basically you're sitting in a chair and you stand, like you use one leg, you lift one leg and all of your weight is on one leg. And you try to stand up from that chair and then you try to sit back down in a controlled way. And I would highly suggest that if you're going to do any of these tests or when you do these tests, you film yourself. So set up your iPhone so that you're filming yourself so that you can go back and watch this. I used to tell people to do it in front of a mirror, but iPhones are way better because you can do it and then you can go back and actually watch yourself doing it and you can look and see, okay, are your hips level or are you getting one of your hips dropping? Is your knee straight or is that knee collapsing in? Do you notice that your foot is like gripping the ground because you don't have enough strength in the hip, so your foot and your leg muscle, your lower leg muscles are trying to compensate, right? So look at the quality of that single leg sit to stand. One step up from that would be the single leg squat. So this is again just lifting one, like if you're standing up, lift one leg, balance on one leg, and then try to squat and then come back up. Same thing. Film yourself. Notice, where's your knee tracking? Is it collapsing in? Is your pelvis staying level? Is your torso upright or are you leaning to one side? Are you compensating by leaning to a side? Test number 3 would be the step down test. So if you're on a step and you just step down forward, you can actually do a forward step down and also a side step down. And again, filming yourself, looking at where your hips are. Is your pelvis level? Where's your trunk? Where's your knee tracking? Are you noticing any collapse at the foot? And then test number 4 would be the single leg bridge hold. So where you're lying on your back, excuse me, lying on your back with both knees bent, and then you straighten one knee so that one foot is not touching the ground, and then you lift your hips up. So you're just pushing through one foot and you lift up your hips and try to just hold it there. So can you keep your hips level? Do you notice your hip dropping? How long are you able to hold it? Do you notice any hamstring cramping? There's a lot of people that when they do this, their hamstring cramps up on them because their hamstrings are compensating. That's a really common muscle that tries to kick in and help when your glutes are weak.
Yeah, it's fun if you try to do single leg bridges after you've already done exercises that highlight your glutes, because you're like, I can totally do single leg bridges, they're fine. But then you do a couple of exercises that strengthen the glutes and they're exhausted by the end of the workout, and suddenly you do that same single leg bridge and your hamstring just seizes up on you. So it's an interesting one.
It's fatigue.
The only thing that I would add to that is you said talk about filming yourself from straight on. The camera would be set up directly in front of you so that you can see if your hips are staying level, just for some clarity there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you adding that in. And then the good news is a lot of these tests can also be used as exercises. So then this is one of the ways, once you figure out where you are, then it's okay, now what do I do about it? What exercises do I need to add in order to improve my hip strength and my single leg control? So we go back to the foundations. We go to glute bridges. We go to single leg glute bridges. We go to clamshells, Kevin's favorite exercise. Clamshells that have gotten a lot of hate from some of the online physical therapists because they're like, clamshells are not functional exercises for runners, which is true. There's never a point in running where you're lying on the ground and lifting your leg. But if you're having a hard time activating that muscle like Kevin did, they're a very good foundational exercise. That's not the same exercise that you should continue doing forevermore, but it is a good activation exercise. Do you still do those activation exercises before you run, like every time you run?
Not before every time I run. Now that I don't have a hernia anymore, I don't need all those activation exercises before every run.
So talk a little bit about what we're talking about.
Okay, so
give us a background.
Sure. What, two years ago, I had a hernia. And when I would head out to run, that led to all sorts of compensatory patterns.
Yes, it did.
Okay, perfect. And my biggest issue, what I figured out is if I did a whole bunch of exercises, all of these guys basically, is sideline hip adduction, clamshells, quadruped hic extensions, what looks like the fire hydrant is what I always call the one thing. If I did a whole bunch of things for my hips, I could go out and run 8 to 10 miles without a problem. And if I didn't do a full set of exercises, somewhere in the middle of the run, I would get that stabbing pain from my hernia. And I don't know what the connection is because I'm not a doctor, but I'm sure that you're like, the obvious connection is because you had the weakness in here, and so you're over relying on muscles that are getting weakened, that are not warmed up to begin with, that are overstretched and all these things. And so essentially, because of where my hernia was and the weakness in all the hip muscles, it would then at some point in time, essentially without getting graphic, pop and cause like stabbed in the gut with a knife pain.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, it was not.
So by Kevin doing some like mobility, opening his hips up, like getting those muscles firing and activated, like there's a little bit of question mark and out there about hip activation exercises. Like your muscles are always active, but there are sometimes, like with Kevin's example that we used, where those muscles aren't firing properly. They're not firing at the proper time, or they're firing in a delayed fashion, right? So they're really not doing their job. So the more you can target some of those muscles to get the activation patterns and the motor patterns firing better, more timely and stronger activation or stronger contractions, that's going to be a good thing. Other single leg strength exercises that I love, like I mentioned, the single leg deadlift is one of my favorite exercises for runners. Step ups and step downs, also fantastic glute strengthening exercises, especially if you're someone that doesn't like squats or can't do squats. Step ups actually activate the glute muscles even better than squats do, is because again, they're a single leg exercise, and because of like physics and the lever arm and the force generation, all that good stuff, step ups are a super effective exercise. Bulgarian split squats, reverse lunges, single leg glute bridges, all of these things are really important strength exercises for us to be doing as runners. And then to take it one step further, we also want to make sure that our glutes are creating power for us. And so that's when we start to integrate plyometrics and power progressions into the workout. You don't want to do these too early because they are, again, a lot more force that's going through the hips. So you want to have a foundation of strength first, and then you can start to add in some light plyometrics. But things like lateral hops, like side to side hops, single leg hops are very good for you. Bounding, skipping, these kinds of things to help with power generation. And really, power is strength plus speed, right? It's the ability to use your strength in a speedy way, essentially. Physics teacher.
I'll take it.
Bring the power in.
It's work over time.
Okay, it's work over time. So again, that's strength.
But yeah,
strength and speed.
I know, but if
right?
you change all the terms, that's force and velocity. That's also going to work for
Yeah,
me.
that works for us. Perfect. It's one of those things that is super important, right? And so hopefully by the end of this episode, you really understand how important your hip strength is and how important it is for you to do single leg exercises as a runner. That's really our goal here with this episode, is really to help bring that awareness so that you can start doing some of these things in your weekly routine.
Yeah, and you listed a whole lot of good exercises there, and you moved into the plyometrics. Plyometrics, because you're hopping, it's even more than running. That power, we talked about 2 to 3 times your body weight. When you're bounding, it's even more than that, which my suggestion, if you're really doing some bounding and some skipping, try and find an incline, because that reduces the impact on your body also. Like if you're going to get into really trying to bound for some distance, if you do it up a hill, you're going to then make it a little bit nicer on your body also.
Yeah, and then of course, whenever we are doing single leg strength, we can't forget about mobility. Like anytime, like strength and mobility go hand in hand, because it's silly for you to just focus on strength if you don't have adequate range of motion in your joints. Like it's important, like mobility is your joint's ability to move fluidly throughout your full range of motion. And so this is where things like hip flexor tightness plays a role, right? Like it's very important for you to try to open up your hip flexors and improve your hip flexor mobility, which is the muscle on the front of your hip, in order for you to activate your glutes. Because if your hips are really tight, it's going to be harder for you to activate, I shouldn't say activate, it's going to be harder for you to get the proper amount of contraction in your glutes, because your hip extension is going to be limited by the tightness in your hip flexors, right? Things like thoracic mobility, working on the mobility of your mid back and upper back, is also going to enhance your hip stability because of the rotational pattern, because your shoulders and your upper body counterbalance your lower body and your hips. So if you are limited with your thoracic mobility, it's going to limit your hip mobility. So all of these things are connected. your ankle mobility is going to influence your knee alignment during single leg things like running. So if you don't have the proper amount of movement in your ankle, then the muscles around your ankle, which also attach up near the knee, those are going to, again, go into compensatory patterns. I think that must be
That is the phrase of today.
Is that the game of episode number 436?
Quite possibly.
How often should you be doing these things? At least 2 to 3 strength sessions a week. I like to include single leg strength in all of our strength sessions for our clients. I like to there's certain, when I design a strength program for our clients, I tick certain boxes, and single leg strength is one of the boxes that I make sure that we incorporate at least somehow in every single exercise. So maybe that's through a step up, maybe that's a split squat, maybe it's a single leg calf raise, maybe it's a single leg glute bridge, or a single leg sit to stand, or a single leg deadlift. There's so many different variations that we're definitely working on single leg strength in every single one. So keeping in mind, actually, I'm going to stop that. So if you are someone that wants the exact exercises to do, you want step-by-step guidance, you want a plan, I'd invite you to go over to realliferunners.com and check out our different coaching options. If you want to test the waters before you commit to anything, we have our 30-day running reset, and that's going to give you a running plan, a strength plan, plus lessons on mindset and nutrition and recovery to help those 5 really important things that you need to strengthen as a runner. If you're someone that is ready to commit, we have our coaching program, our group coaching, or one-on-one coaching. And again, all of our plans include all of the strength exercises that you need, including all of the single leg strength exercises and balance exercises that you need. And it's really fun because not only do these things benefit your running, but they also benefit you in real life. And I think that's one of my favorite things hearing from our clients is not just how their running is improving and how their pain is decreasing and they're running without knee pain that they've had for 25 years, but also how much it was benefiting them getting up and down the ladder, getting the Christmas decorations out of the attic, or getting up and down off of the floor when they're playing with their grandkids, right? Because these things affect your single leg balance and strength and control is really important in all aspects of your life, not just running.
Yeah, every aspect of Christmas decorations really relies on the strength training that I've been working for the rest of the year.
And the hip rotation, getting the box up and down and twisting.
Trying to get some of those boxes into the small opening that is the attic space. They're very heavy boxes, and it's like threading the needle with them while balancing yourself on the ladder. And at some point, it is in fact a single leg stance so that you can get yourself and the box up and down the ladder.
Yeah.
So yes, it is all there.
It's perfection right there. So head over to realliferunners.com to check out our coaching options and the ways that we can help you to take the things from the podcast and actually show you how to apply those in your everyday training, in your everyday life. We would love to be your coaches and be your guides. So head over there and check it out. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love it if you were to leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or leave us a comment on Spotify and a rating and review to help other runners find the podcast and help us to continue to grow and help other people around the whole world. So as always, thanks for joining us. This has been the Real Life Runners Podcast, episode number 436. Now get out there and run your life.